All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us for our GAO info session. Again, Mohammed Sise here. I'll hand it over to Teresa to introduce herself and get us started with the presentation today.
Great, thank you, Mohammed. So there's a few of us here from the GAO or the U.S. Government Accountability Office. If I can have you go to the next slide, Mohammed. Here are the folks that are going to be talking today. I'll have each of us introduce ourselves in more detail when we talk. But I'm Teresa Lowe. I went to Goldman back in 2004. So it's been quite a while since I've been out of school, but I've been at GAO ever since. And I'm in the Education, Workforce, and Income Security team. So for folks, GAO has had a long tradition of recruiting at Berkeley and at GSPP in particular. We have a lot of GSPPers at GAO, as well as folks from other Berkeley departments and programs. Hopefully we can continue that tradition. And we're here today just to kind of talk through GAO work and what GAO work is like in the community and the organization. So the next slide, Mohammed. So today we'll just give you an overview of GAO. If you've never heard of GAO, you're kind of in the same place that I was when I was doing one of these sessions back when I was a grad student. If you have heard of GAO, then you're further along than I am. What our work is like, our culture and organization, and then also the intern and the professional development program, which is the program for full-time hires. And then we'll definitely leave some time for Q&A. Okay, next slide, and then I think I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Arkin. I am GAO's Director for Budget and Intergovernmental Issues, and I am located in the Oakland, or associated with our Oakland office. I live in El Cerrito, not too far from GSPP. I did not go to GSPP, but my wife did, so that's my main connection. And I have been here I'm in my 23rd year here at GAO now, and I can talk quite a bit about what we do as an agency, kind of set the landscape for who we are. So GAO is actually part of the legislative branch. We work for Congress as an independent and nonpartisan agency. And we are really here to evaluate the federal government, federal programs, federal spending, to be able to give advice to Congress and to federal agencies about how to improve programs for the benefit of the American people. A lot of what we do involves evaluating programs, writing reports about how those programs are going, looking for opportunities to improve those programs. If we could go to the next slide, I can elaborate a little bit more on that. Sorry. Like I mentioned, we work for Congress. A lot of what we do comes at the request of congressional committees. So they may ask us to look at a particular program, an agency, a subset of programs across agencies, or other larger challenges for the federal government. And again, generally, those are projects that will go on for a year and a half, and result in a report to Congress. Those are available to the public. And in those, what our goal usually is to identify ways to improve programs, make them more cost effective, make them more consistent with the law, with key practices, things like that. We issue hundreds of reports every year. I think we're working on, I think it's 600 or 700 a year that we will issue. We also testify at congressional hearings based on our work. And a big goal for us, again, is to make recommendations that are actually going to be implemented. Anywhere from 75 to 80% of our recommendations are implemented within 4 years of making them. And some of those recommendations yield what we call financial benefits for the country. So that means either we've identified ways to save costs, or to bring in additional revenue. Those are really important for us because they show the value of our work. We can go to Congress and say, hey, you've invested money into GAO, but we've had a massive return on investment based on the money that you've given us. It's 75 to 100 to 1 for every dollar spent on GAO that we return in benefits for the government and for the American people. Next slide, I can talk about kind of where we are located. Now, this is the context for this is a little bit dated. Historically, about 2/3 of GAO staff worked in our headquarters office in Washington, D.C., with the remaining third in 11 or so field offices across the country. Since the pandemic, that has changed a bit. We now offer an option for people to work remotely wherever they want within the United States or U.S. territories. You just cannot work internationally. It has to be in the U.S. And even for people like myself who are associated with a field office, there is very robust telework at GAO. I work from home most days unless I'm in headquarters for some reason or traveling for field work for a project. I go into the office mostly for social things, but in terms of my work, I don't really need to be in the office. The people that I work with, and this is true for most people who aren't in Washington, I work with a lot of teams and people are spread out all over the place. Even before the pandemic, this was true. I work with a lot of people in Atlanta and Boston and DC. All of our work is team-based, and so you're generally going to be working with a group of analysts, attorneys, economists, and they're going to be located all over the place. And we've been doing that for forever and ever since I've started and beyond. And so some changes to our posture in terms of where people are, but not fundamental in terms of us working in a very distributed environment. Next slide, I can talk a little bit about, we introduced ourselves, there are some of us based on what we call mission teams that we work on. I think this really illustrates that GAO will look at everything that the federal government does. Anything that a federal agency does, federal programs, anywhere we spend money, federal dollars, whether that's something that is implemented by a state or a locality or even internationally, we have the opportunity to look at it. So we have a very broad areas in terms of what people might be interested in. And it's a great place for people who are intellectually curious because we do look at everything. And in the past, you would only be able, we had limitations on which teams you would work on depending on location, but that's changed now. So no matter where you're located, you could wind up working on any of these teams through our, as an intern, through our professional development program, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and then longer term. I'm going to hand it over to Rick to take the next few slides.
Great, thanks, Jeff. So as Teresa said, my name is Rick Sorella. I'm an MPP 2018. Currently on GAO's Financial Markets and Community Investment Mission team. I was in headquarters from 2018 until the pandemic, and I'm currently one of those people who is remote teleworking, just over the border in Maryland, but close enough where we can go back into the office pretty easily. And we have a pretty nice mixture of our culture between being flexible and having telework, but also having a nice sort of in-person friendly atmosphere. FMC in particular is pretty big on allowing people to sort of gather in person, which is a nice change of pace to have those social interactions, but still have that flexibility to work, wherever you like across the country. But I'll talk a little bit about sort of what our work is like. So Jeff mentioned the mission teams. Our specific work is carried out on what we call engagement teams. And this is a cross-functional team, a group of people that come together to work on a particular topic. These can be things like request letters that we get from Congress or mandates that are written into legislation. It's typically an assistant director, which is a manager position, a director, someone like Jeff, who is a manager for a sort of large body of work, and then analysts in charge for that particular engagement. which will result in a report or a testimony. That's the role I'm in right now. I'm an analyst in charge on FIMC engagements. And then on the rest of the team, in addition to the analyst in charge and the assistant director, we also have analysts and senior analysts, as well as the specialists and special positions and collaborators that Jeff mentioned. So as an analyst in charge, it's sort of like being a team captain. You're not management yet. You're still, on the team, but it's a leadership position that provides some sort of thought leadership for the sort of issue at hand, what the engagement is going to be about. We cover such a broad range of topics, and sometimes those topics can be very complex and interrelated, that scoping a question can be a really big part of what we do in our work. As you can recall reading the Eightfold Path or your early GSPP classes, problem definition is a critical part of any sort of policy work, and that's true at GAO as well. So determining our research questions is actually a really complex iterative process that goes from sort of a team taking some background research and coming up with an initial set of potential questions to having a meeting with folks across GAO to give input and expertise based on what we've learned on past jobs or sort of institutional knowledge we have, taking that feedback and refining it into our more concrete researchable objectives. And then we design our methodologies to go along with our research questions and our scope. And we touch on pretty much every methodology under the sun: quantitative, qualitative, formal, informal. It's a pretty wide range. I myself have been lucky enough to work on a lot of different, both qualitative and quantitative methods, and it's all very enjoyable. I think a few people have mentioned that GAO likes having generalists, and that's definitely true. It's a nice way to be able to sort of flex the different skills that you learned at GSPP. It also keeps things fresh. You're not locked into the same process or the same approach every time. You're getting new topics, you're getting new ways of doing things, new techniques, and it really makes things fun and interesting. And then aside from the analysts in charge, analysts on jobs can also take on significant responsibility based on their experience and what role they've played. They may take on an entire research question, or they might take on a methodology that spans multiple research questions on a report. For example, if you're doing focus groups that touch on all of your researchable questions, you might be an analyst on a job who's responsible for organizing the logistics around that. In addition to our formal methodologies, we also do a lot of data gathering. So we'll meet with public officials. As Jeff said, we tend to look at federal programs and federal money, but we're not limited to just federal issues. A lot of times federal dollars flow to state, local, or tribal entities, and GAO will do work looking at how those organizations do what they do using federal dollars. Or there might be private companies who are working on socially important issues. We'll speak with those private entities as well. We can't issue recommendations to state, local, or private entities, but we still interview them and include them in our methodologies when they're relevant to what we're doing. And so we take all that data that we've gathered and we do our analyses. And one of the nice things about GAO is that we're very rigorous. Not only do we have the experts that the analysts work with, so you learn a lot of statistics and econometrics at GSPP, but it's not quite a PhD. And it's a 2-year program. It's not exactly like having a 4-year or beyond PhD program. But one of the nice things is that we do have PhD statisticians and economists on staff. And so you get to work on these rigorous methodologies with the additional support of having people who have gotten a more advanced degree and have worked on this one methodology for years and years and years. And so you get to collaborate with them on these sometimes complex, sometimes multifaceted methodologies that again, are both interesting, but also really impactful because we do get to speak to causality and not just correlations. And so it really is a wide range of both topics and findings that we speak to. In addition to, desk research based on documents and data, we also observe programs in action. We do have a physical component where we will travel to be on site where offices are or where programs are doing their work. But depending on the program, we have a physical infrastructure team that goes out and looks at railways and pipelines. We have a defense capabilities and management team that goes to military bases sometimes around the world. We have a healthcare team that can go to state health agencies in addition to federal agencies, but also they've gone international where they will go to where drugs are made overseas. So it's a pretty wide range, and we do trot the entire globe. And then, as Jeff said, we make recommendations to improve federal policies or programs. Those recommendations are formal, and we track how agencies implement them over time. And we can also make, they're not quite recommendations, but we can issue what are called matters to Congress, where we're not telling Congress what to do, but if there's an issue that's big enough that it's bigger than any one recommendation to any one agency, we can issue a matter to say Congress should consider doing a law on this topic because it's so broad and so important and needs to have a little bit more legal authority than what agencies are working with now. And then we also have a pretty rigorous quality assurance process too. So on top of the methodologies, we have a lot of GAO institutional focus on making sure what we say is accurate, which is nice because that really builds on the sort of trust and reputation that GAO has. And that sort of adds to the authority with which we speak and the way that Congress, think tanks, and media, and even private companies, how they engage with us. There have been times where I've been meeting with private companies on a sensitive topic, and they say we really like the work GAO does because we trust what you say, we know you're objective, and we're happy to speak with you because we trust what you're going to say, whereas they might not be as willing to speak with journalists or advocacy groups that don't have that same sort of background. So on the next slide, you can see some of the issues that we cover. So, Jeff mentioned our mission teams. Within mission teams, portfolios can still be relatively broad. For example, as mentioned before, I'm on the financial markets and community investment team, but it's not all financial markets issues. So I've done work on financial institutions, credit union failures, or what regulators do in terms of their skills and expertise for regulating advanced financial technology. But I've also done economic development work for Native American tribal communities. But I've also done technology work. My mission team recently had a report on facial recognition technology and how the private sector develops a technology and some of the demographic biases and differences that can happen on people with different backgrounds or ages or genders, and how those differences in accuracy can have real world outcomes on things like access to credit or law enforcement issues. And so within any given team, you might get a really wide range of what you're looking at. Artificial intelligence is also, a major issue across society and across the federal government, and it pops up on all the different mission teams. So not just our technology team, but teams like my team, financial markets, look at AI issues in the context of sort of what these topics are and how they connect. But so you can see, for example, on the right with renewable energy, some of our reports might result in traditional data analyses and graphics, or with the picture on detecting deepfakes, it might be sort of an explainer that you might see an infographic, something you might similar to what you might see on Instagram or TikTok. Or we also do sort of process-based findings. On the bottom, there's an example of small business innovation programs that show the stages that a business goes through in obtaining a grant to try and create innovative technology based on federal funds and try and commercialize that new technology throughout that process. And if you're curious about the types of reports we do and the topics that we speak to, our website has a list of all of our public reports and testimonies. You can search any keywords you're interested in. We also do classified work for certain topics, but obviously those won't be on the public website. And then on the next slide, I'll cover a little bit about more about the sort of on the ground work that we do. So, some of our work might be based on testimonial evidence that we get from interviewing agencies and staff members, might be documentary evidence that we get from reviewing, documents and reports, both from agencies and beyond, but also physical. We do go to these places. We'll be on the ground. These are some recent examples, one from the Coast Guard where they looked at the state of sort of training materials like boats, but also things like their fire simulators. We do that across the board for lots of different topics. And then the one on the bottom for homeless shelters for adults. FIMSI has done some related work when it comes to housing issues. So we look at public housing and things like lead paint or environmental issues that are involved. And with things like that, there's no getting around the need for seeing things up close. So sometimes, our own personal statements and pictures will make it into our actual findings, which is another neat thing about GAO. Sometimes getting outside and getting away from your desk can be nice. And on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the experts that we work with. As you can see, we have lawyers, research methodologists, statisticians, econometricians and economists, people with data science or data analytics backgrounds, but also other professional disciplines like accounting, engineers, biologists, various types of different sciences. We work with them all. For example, early on in my GAO work, one of my first jobs was on infectious disease modeling back in 2018 before the pandemic hit. It's a really interesting job. And we dealt with, public health officials across the federal government. A lot of people you saw on TV when the pandemic was hitting. And within GAO, I got to work with both statisticians who were, experts on the modeling that was going on, software engineers that were experts on sort of the data pipelines that fed into these models, but also biologists and former doctors who had the expertise on what hospitals are going through and the biology of the virus itself. And so it's really neat to get to work with those specialists up close and personal in these cross-functional teams. And that means that we hire people from all different kinds of backgrounds. Analysts like myself, often come from places like GSPP, but we do also sometimes hire undergraduates. We also have interns across the board, both from GSPP type places, but also from undergrad. And we hire professionals from all walks of life and all stages of their careers. So it really is a pretty wide mix of skills and backgrounds. U.S. citizenship is required, but I've gotten to work with people from a number of different companies or countries within GAO. So it's nice working with such a diverse group of people in terms of backgrounds and education. And I think with that, I will pass it on to Ava.
Oh, I think me.
Oh, sorry,
But,
back to Teresa.
No problem. Thank you for that great overview, Rick, of how we do the work and the work that we do. So yes, again, I'm Teresa. I've been here for many years. I am in the team called Education, Workforce, and Income Security. So we do a lot of social policy programs and issues. My particular area has been on human services programs. So I've got a couple of, I'm an assistant director, so I'm helping oversee project teams. So one project on school meals in charter schools, another one on infant formula that's been provided through the program called WIC, Women, Infants, and Children's Low Income Assistance. And then another one just starting about refugee assistance for Ukrainians who fled due to the Russian invasion and are in the US getting government assistance. So as you can see, yeah, a wide range of things, even in a small portfolio within a larger team. But this slide has to do with GAO's core values. So the inner circle, accountability, integrity, reliability is kind of fundamental values with how we do our work. And Rick and Jeff kind of spoke to this already to make sure that our work is, independent, objective, accurate, very, highly credible for Congress and other stakeholders that read our work. But then the outside circle have to do with our people values at GAO to make sure people feel valued, respected, and treated fairly. As Rick mentioned, our work is very collaborative and team-oriented. We have a small project team, but then we're working with a variety of other people within GAO to make sure, our work is nuanced and accurate. Within a project, we're talking to a lot of external entities as well, as you mentioned, different officials, advocacy, research groups, people themselves affected by a federal program or policy. So with all of that, we really strive to, get different perspectives across the board to make sure our work is well informed and, has a 360 perspective. We're also, an equal opportunity employer that strives to build and maintain a diverse workforce. Very important for us. If you can go to the next slide, Mohammed. The GAO is absolutely committed to attracting and retaining a diverse workforce and maintaining a positive, collaborative, and inclusive environment within our work. So we've been ranked top among other federal agencies in our support for diversity. One aspect of that is within our agency itself, we have a number of different affiliation groups, such as those that are shown on the slide. These groups have meetings, sponsor speakers, have information sharing, newsletters, do informal mentoring, among other things. We also have a diversity and inclusion strategic plan. So among that is tracking, our recruiting and retention of a diverse workforce, and other things like informal mentoring opportunities for people of all groups. And I don't, if any of people here on the line have been part of PPIA, GAO has had a long, relationship with PPIA, and usually each summer we do a info session with definitely the Berkeley PPIA, but I think often with the other summer institutes as well. And we have a number of PPIA alums at GAO as well. On the next slide. In addition to DEIA being a high priority within our organization, it's also reflected in the work that we do. So here's a handful of reports of recent topics in recent reports that we've covered: discipline disparities among girls in public schools, healthcare to Indigenous people, foster care youth with LGBTQ+ identities, people with disabilities and voting access, which is very timely and topical right now, disadvantaged communities and drinking water. So a lot of these issues, these very timely and key issues are things that GAO is also working on and reporting on for Congress. Next slide. And then just to mention, people have kind of talked to this, our progressive work environment. So GAO for many years has ranked among the best places to work in the federal government. We are definitely committed to work-life balance. I'd say generally you could work a 40-hour work week. Sometimes there are, deadlines and short turnaround projects that need to be worked on where you aren't able to do that. But for the most part, those are occasional than the rule, more than occasional than the rule. As we've talked about, we have telework, flexible schedules, technology that facilitates virtual teams. At the same time, of course, if you need to come into the office or you need to go on work travel, that's part of expectations for GAO that you are able to do that when needed. GAO also invests in continuous learning and development. So in addition to your first couple of years at GAO, where there's a lot of training on how to do the work at GAO, all of us, as long as we've been here, continue to have training requirements each year where there's a real emphasis on professional learning and, through the career. So in addition to, a training that you can take through a learning center, a lot of teams and offices will sponsor brown bags, bringing in experts from the outside or teams talking about things that they've done. And it really makes GAO kind of a academic learning environment where, again, like if you're intellectually curious, you can do well here and thrive. GAO also recognizes and rewards high performance through awards, time off awards, and recognition in other ways. And then finally, just to mention that GAO has a student loan repayment program as well for folks who think they'll be at GAO for, a period. You have to commit to being at GAO for 3 years and meet other eligibility requirements, but it can be a way of paying off your student loans ultimately. I took advantage of it and it was very helpful. Okay, so I think I can turn it to Ava next.
Yeah, thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Ava. I am an analyst in the professional development program, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But I also did my internship 2 summers ago with GAO. I graduated from the Goldman School with my master's in public policy just last May. So I'm happy to be back engaging with the Berkeley community so soon. I am currently in IAT, which is the International Affairs and Trade Mission team. My engagement is on the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., so I've been learning about the foreign investment review process and been interviewing federal agencies and external stakeholders. My policy background is in social safety net programs and issues, as well as criminal justice advocacy, so a mix of different things. And in my time at the Goldman School, I was involved in the policy advocacy clinic with the law school and the Othering and Belonging Institute, as well as being a grad student instructor in the public policy program. And so some of the key competencies that GAO is looking for in both analysts and interns is the ability to work as a team and collaborate effectively, thinking critically, being able to evaluate and analyze information and data. So any research skills is a definite plus, as well as writing and communicating effectively, and having the ability to manage one's workload is really important. And also having a healthy dose of curiosity. A lot of the job is being a professional learner and being open and ready to use your skills to work on different topics. And so that is one of the key things. In the next slide, I'll talk about the internship program. And so for the internship program, the requirement is to be actively enrolled in the undergrad or graduate program. And so the internship usually occurs in the summer, but we also have fall and spring internships as well. I did mine in the summer. So this is a paid internship that requires between 10 to 16 weeks of work. So a minimum of 400 hours and a maximum of 640 hours. And this position allows for possible conversion into permanent employment. And that's kind of the path that I went to and went through. So I'll talk about my PDP experience through that conversion as well in just a bit. But my internship 2 summers ago was in the strategic issues mission team. And so I worked on federal recruitment and retention challenges and successes in the US territories and Hawaii and Alaska. And I actually had the
Oh no, I think we lost Ava. Maybe.
Oh, a little bit.
I think she was going to say she got to travel to Puerto Rico, but maybe I'll turn it to Marie for the moment, and maybe we'll be able to come back on during that time.
Happy to plug in. Hi everyone, my name's Marie. I am a second year Master's in Public Policy student at the Goldman School right now. Some of y'all may recognize my face. I interned with GAO this past summer as part of my mandatory Goldman internship, and I worked in the STAA practice area or mission team, which is the science, technology, assessments, and analytics practice team. And I was looking at the workforce development efforts of a federal health agency. And I'm happy to speak about my experience on the internship, things that really stood out about GAO. And I think I'll jump into those first and we'll see what Ava has to say. I'm guessing we agree on a lot of these points. But I think the internship is very unique at GAO because you join as a graduate student intern or as an intern and you are part of the team. That within the first week that I joined, I was tasked with data analysis. I was diving into the background materials. I was participating in meetings, and folks were calling me in to participate too. So I was on a really small team. There were 4 of us, which was really great for what I wanted. I felt like I really got to know my coworkers, even though, like folks have said, people work remote. So I was working with folks in Denver, in New Hampshire, in DC, and it was just a really, really great experience if you're looking to do meaningful work, to meaningful projects with the federal government. And I really loved how much responsibility and ownership GAO gave interns. I didn't feel like an intern during my time there. It flew by. And so I think, just the amount of ownership that you have and the amount of touch points GAO gives you. So GAO sets you up with mentors, both an office mentor, a practice area mentor. They make sure that you have various touch points with different directors who are in different mission teams to really understand the scope of GAO's work. And I think we've heard this from folks on the call that GAO covers a really broad range of meaningful topics within the federal government. And so, if you're working remotely, it can be hard to get an understanding for that true scope of work. And one thing I really appreciated was having these coffee chats set aside and getting to chat with folks who have been at GAO for, 10, 20 years and really understand what the federal audit process looks like and just hear their experiences and their insights about all of that work. And yeah, I loved it. I'm sure I see some nodding from Teresa. You know what I'm talking about. I would love to be a resource for current GSPP students or anyone who's on this call. And I can actually post my email in the chat right now. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I would be happy to chat about the internship, happy to chat about what it's like doing the remote work. I was in the Oakland office, but I worked for the most part from my apartment here in Berkeley. And I really, really just had a great experience. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Marie. That was
Yeah.
really, that was great.
And hopefully we get Ava back.
I know. Well, I can take it from here until
Yeah.
she comes back. Yeah, so that is the internship program. If you can go to the next slide, Mohammed. Okay. So this is the program, PDP, we call it Professional Development Program. Most people come in to this through the internship conversion. The internship conversion allows you to not have to apply competitively through the whole USA Jobs process again, and you can just be converted, which is really great. And then this is the full-time hire position. And you come in as an analyst. And even more probably than an intern, you are absolutely expected to be part of the team. Although Marie, it's great. Sound like you were fully part of the team as an intern. But you come in as an analyst, and it's a development program. So you're doing, you have, individualized coaching and assistance. You do have a number of trainings during your time. It's a 2-year program where, generally speaking, you rotate through 3 different GAO mission teams. So each rotation is about 8 months long. And Ava currently is doing one in the International Affairs group. And then she's got 2 more after that, where she'll kind of, as a analyst, you get to put in your preferences for which teams you'd like to rotate through, but then it's also a matter of where the agency kind of needs you to go. So there's a meshing of those things and figuring out where people end up. There are also performance assessments and opportunities for pay increases every 6 months, which is kind of nice because usually after the development program, it's once a year. And then, yes, as mentioned, you are absolutely a full contributing member of the team. You get a lot of ownership and a lot of responsibility kind of right off the bat, and with coaching and support, but we definitely look to our PDP analysts, which we call them, to take on a lot of responsibility, right from the start. Next slide. Okay, so I should say after the 2 years, you as a PDP analyst end up putting your preferences for where you want to be placed permanently, which mission team, which like division within GAO. Again, it's where you end up is sort of a partially preferences and then partially where the agency needs you to go. But after that time, you become kind of a permanent analyst in a team, in a division. Sometimes people do, though, switch divisions during their career at GAO if they decide they want to try a new area. So that definitely does happen. Just looking if Ava has emailed me. Anything else I'm missing about PDP, Jeff or Rick, that you guys can think of, since I'm kind of doing this off the cuff?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. When we can answer more questions. I'm also a PDP advisor. As a PDPer, you get an advisor that kind of stays with you through the 2 years that you're doing the rotation. So you get new teams and you're in a new group at GAO, but you have one advisor that sticks with you through the 2 years, and they kind of help, they're there for you to kind of, as a consistent point, kind of be aware of the opportunities that you've gotten, opportunities that you still need to get. Great. Are you back on, Ava?
I am. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay,
I was having some
awesome.
network issues.
Okay, Well, I will turn it back to you.
Oh no.
Uh-oh, did we lose her again?
Ava.
Okay. Well, I will then keep going. And um, well, this slide is just about application tips. So in terms of, applying for GAO internship, for example, and I think the internship is really the best way of getting to GAO if you're interested. We haven't had a full-time PDP announcement in the last couple of years. It's really sort of dependent on our budget, and often our budget is a little bit in flux, as you might know, with Congress having, a lot of continuing resolutions and not having their full year fiscal year funded at the start of the year. But anyway, I highly recommend the internship if you're interested and a first year student or an undergrad student. You can sign up to get alerts from USA Jobs, and you can get to the USA Jobs GAO announcement through the GAO careers section of our website. Starting the USA Jobs resume sooner than later is good, even before the GAO announcement is open, because that resume can be time consuming. Make sure you're applying for the right job opening. I think there should be an undergrad position and a graduate position when the internship opens. And I don't know the exact timing of when the summer internship will be open, but often it's been posted at early December. And I will definitely, let Mohammed and Cecile know when I have a sense of that timing. It's good to apply as early as possible. They usually have an announcement with a window, 2 weeks or something, that the announcement will be open, but sometimes they also say they will close earlier if they get, 500 applications, for example, and sometimes it can close kind of fast. That said, it's also good to make sure your application is well done. So kind of a balance between making sure you have enough time to, write a good essay and all of that, but also not waiting till the last minute. For the internship, there should be one essay question as typically done in past years. And it's pretty usually straightforward. It'll ask you to kind of talk about, like your research and evaluation experience, maybe your experience working in teams. So a lot of the things that we mentioned earlier the things that GAO looks for people to have skills in: critical thinking, research analysis, good teamwork. All of those are kind of things that GAO is also looking for when you submit an application. So it's good to be very clear and direct in writing an essay response, and also use specific examples, and both work and classroom experience count. I think you do. I don't really know exactly what the internship announcement will look like with respect to location. Actually, I should have given we don't now. I think, there's more flexibility in terms of where people are located. So I'm not entirely sure what it looks like with that, but you don't choose a policy area typically. Yeah. So I think I'll just leave it at that and open it up to questions. And folks can either raise their hand or put the question in the chat, or just come off mute. Might be the easiest thing for us.
Yeah, I have a question. So if we are a senior expected to graduate in spring 2025, would you recommend, would we still be able to apply for the summer internship, or we would have to opt for the spring internship?
So yeah, good question. You have to be a student you have to be returning to, school after your internship. So yes, normally you would have been able to apply. You wouldn't be eligible for the summer internship, I'm afraid. Although, if you go to graduate school, you could keep it in mind for something in the future. And then the spring internship, I'm afraid, has already, I think they're doing interviews for that announcement now. So that's closed and they're already kind of moving on that one. So sorry about that in terms of the timing, but if you're interested in GAO, and there's an opportunity in the future, it's still good to sign up for alerts through USA Jobs.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Katie asked, do you have a sense as to the breakdown of, oops. Oh, huh. Anyone know this of my GAO colleagues? And Mohammed,
No,
you can
I mean, I
stop the
think,
screen share right now if you want, and we can just look at the people. But go ahead, Jeff.
yeah, I don't know for all I actually looked at something like this. So DoD would probably be the largest single agency. The team that we have that works on defense issues is one of our top largest teams, and they generally do defense work. We also do a lot of work related to contracts. So I think DoD is probably far and away the agency that has the largest number of audits. HHS, Health and Human Services, is another one that has a large concentration of audits. Beyond that, offhand, it's probably all over the place. The cabinet level agencies are going to have more than some of the smaller agencies, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Can we indicate what policy areas we are interested in on the application, even though it's not a guarantee? I don't remember. I don't think there is a question like that. But,
Yeah, I don't. Go ahead.
I was going to
Sorry, go
say
ahead.
in
Sorry.
writing your resume and your essay may reflect what policy experience you've had. So sometimes when that comes through kind of loud and clear, they might try and put you, if you do an internship in a team, let's say you had a lot of climate policy related stuff, you might end up in the team that does that sort of work. So yeah, Jeff, did you have thoughts on expressing policy interest on the application?
Sorry, I would. Yeah, I would just say you could probably put it somewhere in your essay. I think generally we're looking for people who are coming to GAO to learn about GAO's processes. It's pretty likely you will end up in a place that may be unrelated to your interest. But really the key thing is you're going to be learning about GAO and performance auditing, and is this a place that you might want to be longer term? And from my standpoint, at least, that's probably more important than having it line up with your very specific interest.
Yeah, and like people have said, GAO does look for generalists. So if you are a person with a very passion for a specific policy area, and you might be heartbroken if you didn't end up in that area, then there's a bit of a balance because it's possible you might not end up in that area if you come to GAO. So yeah, something to think about. We do look for people who could maybe be plopped into anywhere and learn about the topic and contribute to the project. So I go to Shunyata. I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name correctly, who has her hand raised.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I might have missed the full implications of this, but seemed to indicate that for the internship or some of the opportunities, there might be different positions in different parts of the US. And also, online positions. And I was just curious more so about if there's any like greater acceptance rates for certain positions outside of DC compared to DC positions, like it's more competitive for those slots, or if it's more based on just like you apply for the program and then you get offered certain, spots or positions.
You know what? That's a really
My
good question, actually, because of how
yeah,
we've done it historically and how it might be evolving. Go ahead, Jeff.
it's definitely evolving. My sense, just because you may be accepted or apply to a position that's quote unquote in Washington D.C. doesn't mean you have to be there. You can live anywhere. You do have to show up for the first day or two of orientation in person, regardless of which office that you're situated with. And I believe this past year, the internships were mostly, if not exclusively, categorized as headquarters. But again, well, maybe not exclusively, because Marie, you were in Oakland, but it was pretty heavily concentrated with headquarters. But that doesn't mean you have to live in DC and come in. That's a big change in the program over the last few years.
But that's a good, I can try and do a little bit more research within GAO to see what their plans are for the summer internship and how they will do slots, for example, if a lot of them will be more in headquarters as they have been in the years past. But like Jeff said, you do have to show up on day one. If we're officially in headquarters, you do have to show up day one at headquarters to do the orientation. After that, though, you don't have to be there. So
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Although just noting that, there are people who go to headquarters, and there can be, like an internship cohort. So sometimes that can be beneficial. And Marie, I know you came into the Oakland office a little bit, and there were PDPers in the Oakland office to kind of talk to and share, and all of that. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Yeah. So with the Oakland office, I was actually the only graduate student intern over the summer, but there was a somewhat critical mass of PDPs and analysts and folks of all different tenures who went into the Oakland office pretty regularly. And so on one hand, you don't really have the, I guess, group intern cohort experience that you might get in headquarters. But there were also opportunities to meet people, to have lunch with folks. There were happy hours that even folks who weren't in the office that day would come into Oakland and meet everyone. And so it was still great to see people at different points during the summer.
Great, thank you. I'm looking at the chat. Emily asked about, is there a letter of recommendation or other major components besides the essay? There is no letter of recommendation. There is a transcript, but you can provide the informal transcript. And I think Mohammed and Cecile might know better about that, like how they do it through GSPP, but I don't think GAO doesn't have to have a formal transcript. Okay, do they only work, Vivian asked, do interns work on only one policy area? Do they get to try a variety during the internship? Usually interns are assigned to one project team. That's most common. I guess occasionally they might be splitting their time across a couple of project teams, but it would be at least in the same larger mission team. But mostly it's one team, but then they do try to offer a variety of things, like during the summer, like knowledge sharing, meet and greets. I don't know, Marie and Ava, maybe you guys can speak to that if there's like opportunities when you're an intern to learn about other teams and other aspects of GAO.
Yeah, I can briefly just say when I was working in the STAA mission team, everyone on my team at some point over the summer chatted me and said, "Hey, is there any mission team you're really interested in? Let us connect you with folks so you can hear about what the work is like in that mission team." And so there were many points of access to learn more about the other mission teams.
Yeah, I think super similar with me. Yeah, I think the internships are about 3 months, so not a lot of time to work on, a different team. So yeah, I did just work with the one team, but definitely a lot of opportunities to meet folks from other mission teams. I met Teresa from a different mission team during my internship, and we chatted about EWIS and that and some stuff you can attend and
Yeah, good question. Any other questions? Either, I
We
don't see
are
any
at
more in the chat.
time.
Oh, yep, and we are at time.
Lisa, do you mind if students can reach out to you directly, or how would you like to communicate with folks?
Sure, yeah. People can email me. And maybe, I don't know. And Mohammed, I can follow up with you, Jeff, Rick, or Ava, if you guys are open to questions as well. We could share your contact info, but I can also be the main point person on this.
Yes. And thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. I'll stop the recording. If folks have to head out, please feel free to. Hope you all have a good rest of your day.